James McKenna. Nice to see you, Jim. Esquire, representing Cole Ave LLC for Open Space Residential Development, also known as an OSRD, subdivision at 19 Cole Ave, Assessor's Map 213, Lot 20. Welcome back into the fray.
Yeah, nice to be with all of you this evening. Good to be back. And I hope I don't sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're really happy to be here tonight. We're submitting a very preliminary informal pre-application review for this proposed project. My name is James McKenna from Essex, attorney. I represent 19 Cole Ave LLC. The owner is on with us tonight, Arthur Pimentel, together with our site engineer, Tony Chimpetta from Hayes Engineering, who will go through some of the detail if time permits. But again, this has thankfully been an idea that's long in coming. I generally don't like to be the first to propose something under any zoning ordinance or be the first of anything, but here we are. This is an opportunity, I think, to propose something that sort of threads the needle, we believe, in terms of the OSRD. Although it has not been utilized before in Gloucester, it's a great tool, and we're excited to be here with you all to work, hopefully in a collaborative way, to propose something that will be a good example going forward, how to submit under this ordinance, as well as to propose something that we can all be happy about at the end of the day. My client has pursued some other options here on this site, but took the advisement of your staff, and thankfully we have good people in your offices who advised us to pursue this because they saw the opportunity to explore this application process and perhaps at the end of the day come up with a good project that does exemplify the values and objectives of the OSRD. So that said, we're kind of nervous about this because there is no precedent for it. But that said, there's always a first, and we're willing to take the first step and see how we go. But I think I want to set the tone here to say we really are open to all thoughts and considerations and concerns of the board and the staff and abutters and anyone, frankly, who are interested in this process, to give us some feedback so we can get a good that exemplifies the kinds of values and interests that the city wants to see happen under this ordinance. So with that said, the site, if you have any familiarity with it, is at the end of Cole Ave. It's has a history of being utilized more as a utility space than a space for residential use. It's I don't want to get into the issues of butters and whatnot now and how they have utilized the site, but the site has been formally used as a facility for wood fabrication and things of that nature. And so there was a mill on the site for many years ago. That became derelict, and the site became used as a place where people thought they could just use it as they wanted to. You can imagine what that would bring. Some trailers and things, and some potential transient use that really doesn't make the most of a site of this nature. The site sits at the edge of a very important city resource, a water resource, Wallace Pond. It really speaks to the need to protect that resource and to ensure that it's going to remain as a protected water resource. And so any development here should reflect that. And so I think it spoke to the staff and to the applicant as a possible OSRD project for those very reasons. And when you go back and look at the purpose and intent, 515.1 of the OSRD ordinance, it really outlines the reasons and rationale as to why it's important to take the opportunity to design a site when the opportunity arises, when there are some significant environmental issues and values that need to be protected, that it be done, and deference be given to the planning board to be creative in proposing a project that takes into account these values and goals of the OSRD. So we were inclined to agree and say, okay, let's try to do this. And we believe that we can do it. There are some very significant dimensional restrictions and open space restrictions under the ordinance. And not all sites present these opportunities, but we believe that this site just may do that. So we'll go into some of the detail. I'll have Tony from Hayes Engineering discuss the particulars of the yield plan and how that reflects on the proposed plan that we would ask for some input on. But again, this is a very preliminary conversation. And so we are very wide open to your thoughts and concerns and objective thoughts about how we can make sure that we propose a project that succeeds in achieving the objectives of the OSRD so that it is a good example going forward for others to utilize. We believe that we can preserve in excess of the 50% requirement in open space. We believe that we can propose a project that reflects good on the preservation of the natural contours and features of the site, and that protects the watershed and Wallace Pond. We believe that we can propose a project that is consistent with the housing objectives of the city and propose a mid-range housing and duplex cluster sort of arrangement that makes wise use of the space as well as minimizing the impact that that development will have on the site. We believe that we can really be respectful of the abutters and the area and build something that everyone, hopefully at the end of the day, will be pleased with in terms of its look and its configuration and its access, and look at some of the things that the city needs perhaps to improve on the street, and also perhaps some upgrades relative to infrastructure that we can introduce that makes the project work effectively and for the benefit of the abutting areas. And so it's a interesting site. If you are familiar with Cole Ave, it's a less than a 3-iron away from the MBTA station. It's in walking distance, frankly, less than a quarter of a mile, which raises an interesting question about the recent state legislation but we won't get into that because we're not submitting under that, but it does bring those thoughts to mind. It really is a site that I hope that we have a site visit and you go out there and you see it. I think you'll get a good feel for the fact that it's a challenging site because of the way it was utilized in the past. It needs to be something better than it is. It needs to be cleaned up. It needs to have a good investment made into it, because I think you'll see very clearly that it's a site that's been used and frankly perhaps even abused in the past, and it's a time that it is properly attended to with proper investment and for good reason. So we hope that we propose a project that brings value to the neighborhood, brings value to the city, and brings good, strong housing, mid-range income housing that really adds good value to the housing stock of the city. And does so with the least amount of impact that we can have on a site, and reflects the good interests of protecting our water supplies and our open space as well. So I'd ask Tony to walk us through the site, give some orientation to the board of what we're talking about, and take a look at the yield plan and then proposed concept plan. But again, this is very preliminary. I think it's wide open in terms of thought and comment, and we're really welcome to have the board's input, to be collaborators with us on something that is at the end of the day going to be something we're all going to be happy with. So Tony, would you walk us through the plan?
Thank you. Tony Capuchetti with Hayes Engineering, 603 Salem Street, Wakefield, Massachusetts. So as Jim was saying, that the site is located off of Cole Ave. There's also it also fronts on a paper street called Esperanto, that, if you can see my cursor, runs through at the north of the property. And the existing Cole Avenue Road is just shy of the property, the paved section, however, the right of way runs to the end. Our site's kind of showing yellow, and you can see that there's a large area of clearing where the former lumber mill was located. As Jim said, we're here under the open space residential development. It's governed by section 515 of the ordinance. It requires a minimum open space tract of 50% of the parcel area. It excludes resource areas, excludes about 2/3 of the required buffer. There's a vegetated buffer that's required around the entire site. And we felt it was appropriate because of the proximity to Wallace Pond, which is a public water supply. It's one of the city's reservoirs. So the goal would be to protect the bulk of the watershed in perpetuity. And as was stated, we're about 1,000 feet away from West Gloucester Station. Our site being down here, the West Gloucester commuter rail station, 1,000 feet away, less than a quarter mile, a short walk for any of their residents, which is makes it a very good development site, commuter oriented, and some smaller townhomes are what are proposed. In the existing condition, what I'm showing here is the 100-foot buffer zone to either the top of bank. There's a small associated wetland in this area here, and then we don't own to the pond at the southernmost extent, only on the southwestern extent. So the green area is the 100-foot buffer zone on the site. The site's 3.7 acres, and this orange line represents the watershed, where it breaks from water that runs directly to Wallace Pond, and then water that runs off to the north, and it's ultimately tributary to the Annisquam River. We did a yield plan, and this is a requirement of the ordinance to show the maximum number of lots that will be proposed under a grid subdivision. We have a 500-foot dead end extension with a cul-de-sac. We end up with 6 conforming lots, each that would provide a duplex at 10,000 square feet. I'm sorry, 20,000 square feet in the underlying zoning district. But again, if you remember where that 100-foot buffer zone line is over here, we have a couple of houses in there, some grading that gets us close to 25 feet. So there was a lot of disturbance, and when we sat down and discussed this with planning, they said we could do better, and I believe we have. So the proposed plan, what we do is we come in and bring the units as close as we can to the existing boundary. This is the vegetated buffer that needs to remain around the site. This area here, which represents the bulk of the watershed going to Wallace Pond, is preserved in perpetuity with an open space restriction. One thing that we've tossed around, and it would be up to the board, is should this go through, the Concom can hold the restriction. However, we'd like to offer it up to the water department. There are some grants and other things for water supplies that preserve their watersheds. So if they could benefit the water department more, we'd like to see if they could hold the land. But we propose a loop road again, 6 duplex units. The architecture works such that the units would be kind of connected at the garage. The garage would be 1 story with 2.5 story wood frame, about 1,750 to 2,250 square feet. These units would be walkout basements, so we could have the potential for a finished basement, and clustered away from the wetlands. Actually, the way it's proposed, a portion of the lot line enters the 100-foot buffer zone, but none of the work is proposed within the 100-foot buffer zone to Wallace Pond. Again, this is that watershed line. Although the road is presented in the watershed is picked up by some catch basins and treated and then discharged towards the Ennisquam. And then we do have the roofs of 3 units, but we are proposing to infiltrate the clean rooftop runoff to really effectively take any impervious area that's tributary to the pond out. The front of all these, the driveways all pitched towards the road. We also have some, hopefully we'll schedule a site visit. You'll see Cole Ave is fairly narrow, so we're proposing to widen Cole Ave, install curbing to conform to the subdivision and generally improve the right of way, as well as build a small portion of Esperanto and then bring the driveway onto the site. This would be a private drive. However, people with retaining rights in Esperanto and Cole Avenue. Just to kind of show where we're at, the existing parcel 159,000, just shy of 160,000 square feet. We're required to have 79,000 square feet of open space, and there are some significant restrictions. You can't have open space that is considered a resource area. You can't use portions of the buffer zone areas greater than 20% slope. So essentially, we end up at exactly 50.1%, and this has to be contiguous. So the way the road works, the portion that is on the east side of our proposed road doesn't count towards the open space for qualifying under the OSRD. We just get to the 50.1. However, if you factor in all the open space, the buffer zones, the vegetated buffer strip, the area on the easterly side of the road, almost 60% of the property is protected open space. And then we show each of the lots is hovering just around 5,000 square feet, with about 2,300 square feet of lot coverage between roofs, driveways, and hardscape. And all the lots have at least 20 feet of frontage. So as Jim said, we're very early in the process. The section of the pre-application section, we made a written request. That's how we got here. The information is pre-application. And the next step would be a pre-application site visit if the board would entertain that idea. Moving forward, and we're looking to try and get some constructive criticism to go forward as well. I can go back to the plan if that helps, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tony. We had a little bit of a hard time hearing you on your mic, so as we move forward through this process, we might want to get a little better connection for you.
I apologize.
No, that's quite all right. So we've been working on definitive subdivision plans for a year, so.
So we would open it up for questions, Chairman.
Thank you.
Again, this is a very limited draft proposal.
Yeah.
We know that there's been some concerns raised very late breaking with some of others and whatnot, and we would be wide open to listen to those concerns and do whatever research we need to do to take those under advisement. But again, as a very initial preliminary meeting, we thought we'd just scope this out with you folks, get your thoughts and comments, and just determine if we're on the right track. And if you think we are, then we'll move forward.
Yeah. Beverly, you have a question, or are you just covering? I just need to mute yourself, unmute.
No, not at this moment,
Okay.
but I'll listen and maybe I have a question. If we could go back to seeing everybody, that would be helpful.
Sure. I'll stop the share.
Great.
I'll
James?
just add a couple of points about the process so far. We did see that conventional subdivision plan several months back at this point, and had a kind of a review from the engineering department and the environmental engineer. So there's clearly a lot of concern with some sensitive area adjacent to Wallace Pond. And so that's when we suggested that there might be either other orientations of road access or potentially other permitting vehicles that might be more appropriate for the site. The one thing that I think would be helpful, there's a conceptual open space residential development plan. There's some plan that shows some of the features of the site. We've received the table that talks about what's excluded from the open space. It would be helpful. There is that first step in the design process that's supposed to identify the primary conservation areas and secondary conservation areas. So that might give the board members more of a sense of, the design process and why, you've selected to focus on this particular area for the development. I mean, I think some of it's very obvious, but just having that would be helpful. And for folks that are watching, I think it's important. We did receive some public comment, which is in the drive and has been submitted to the board members. I just want to make it perfectly clear. There were some comments around public outreach from the applicant. This is pre-application. There is no requirement to do so. I think as a board would always encourage outreach to the abutters when things are starting to be proposed, but there's nothing in ordinance that requires that. So however this process resolves itself over the next few weeks, it's not the issuance of a permit. It's not the issuance of anything other than the opportunity to kind of have a dialogue and decide whether, again, there's one approach that could be filed next week as a definitive plan. And there's been some concerns raised around that. And so, it's the opportunity for the applicant and the board to explore, the potential for an alternative option.
Thank you, Greg. Greg, if you could, so we never ever get to see a alternative division, sort of an alternative plan other than the OSRD or the cluster. So, in this permutation, I mean, it seems as though the alternative to the OSRD would require an enormous amount of relief from pretty much anybody and everybody that's in the city. And so talking about yield, what's the, how do we get from here to there just to sort of understand what our yield is, or is it just simply?
Yeah, so I think what Tony has done is he's taken the rules and regs of the planning board and applied them in terms of right-of-way width requirement, length of road requirement, conceptual drainage. It does require a lot of site grading, but there's no prohibition to site grading. The only thing in additional that would be required and still may be required because this site is tributary to Wallace Pond is there is a watershed protection overlay district. But again, that also has standards that can be applied. So I think, that the representation from the initial plan is it is something that would otherwise comply with the subdivision standards. And perhaps Tony can speak to that as well.
That's
Hang
correct.
on.
Sorry.
It's just, you're talking about the yield plan, Greg?
Yes,
Yes, not the cluster. Okay.
correct.
Yeah, so
Can I ask a question about the yield? Can I ask a question about the yield?
Okay.
I missed the total acreage on this site
it's
against which,
3.7 acres, 20,000 square feet for a duplex lot, 20,000 square feet for a single family lot. It's a unique zone where it's.
no, I get that, but 12 is the maximum allowed?
Technically, if you read the OSRD,
Yeah.
it allows for 90% of the upland, which most of this is upland, divided by the underlying zoning.
Yeah.
However, we in talking to Greg, we realized that that would kind of be coming in pie in the sky saying, hey, we can do this, but physically it would not meet the subdivision rules and regulations. So we provided a plan that for all intents and purposes meets the subdivision rules and regulations. It requires no relief. It would require the filing of a notice of intent. We do get fairly close to the wetlands and the Wallace Pond resource. We know there would be significant pushback on that. But from a design standpoint, there's no relief required. There is a special permit. However, residential is not one of the exempted uses in the watershed protection. And my understanding is that the watershed protection would be for incidental grading in the district for the special permit. So again, we're trying to ground this in reality. And we think that given the character of the neighborhood, 1,700 to 2,200 square foot duplex units are in keeping. We're trying to have them as a moderate price. And we think being near the commuter rail station is a good selling point for these. And we really think it would add some needed housing to the Gloucester market as well.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm not arguing with that, but you still didn't answer my question. And how did you get 12 units out of 3.6 acres at 20,000 square foot, at 20,000 square foot?
20,000 square feet a lot provides you 6 lots is 120,000 square feet.
Gotcha. Times 2. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
And then you're
All right,
allowed.
just want to make
duplexes
sure the
by
12 was
Yep.
correct. I
Yes.
made a
Yep.
mistake in my calculation and I came up wrong, but it's because I didn't count for the by right duplexes. So 12 is the correct number. I just wanted people to understand that that is within the allowable density.
Thank you, Beverly. Any other questions while we're huddled around our computers tonight?
So just to beat this dead horse, Greg, the yield
We've only been
plan-
talking about it for 15 minutes. I don't think we're there yet.
I think I'm asking the same question as Beverly, though, it is in a different way.
Yeah.
The yield plan, according to you, it does comply with all subdivision regulations. So
So
if they put
I
in,
haven't done that deep dive, but even with the plan that they're proposing, which is not consuming all of the frontage of the proposed road, there could be creative ways to try to add additional lots. Again, I think this was actually an original approach. It wasn't really necessarily designed as just a yield plan that might begin with really just lotting it almost as if it was two-dimensional rather than three-dimensional. They went a little bit further with it as a almost kind of a preliminary definitive, I'm sorry,
so for real
preliminary
options, yeah, I get it.
subdivision plan
Yeah.
by not just drawing a layout and laying out some lots. They actually looked at the standards to try to provide essentially a waiverless subdivision if they were going to pursue that route.
So for
And
people
if
watching,
I could,
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say for people watching, abutters and whoever, I just want to be clear that there are two possible plans here. One is a normal subdivision plan, which would probably, Greg is saying, be possible, assuming there was a much more granular look at it, or put the same number of units in half the space, which looks kind of crowded, but does do what the open space ordinance is designed to do, which is preserve half of the lot or half of the area for open space. And just, yeah, go ahead, Beverly, then I have another question.
Yeah, because with regard to this, so I did my calculations. I have to apologize. Sometimes my math is sloppy, but the site is just really a few square feet short of 8 lots at 20,000 square feet, which means that the site could be developed to 16 units. They're proposing 12. So that is a function, I think, of looking at the carrying capacity of the site, looking at the topography of the site, looking at the requirements for open space. And so in that regard, the code would allow more than they're proposing. And I want everybody to, I think everybody should realize that.
Yes, so my next question is, could the applicant just describe, or Greg, I'm not sure who, the surrounding land to the west and also to the south? I think that's all City of Gloucester land, right? And what is that currently being used for?
Some of that is area that is protected lands. And so we believe that the south area certainly seems as existing, natural vegetation and protected area. The abutting property to the, I think, I'm not sure if it's northwest is an abutting property. And that's to be determined. We've engaged in some dialogue there to see if there's some some joint interest in protecting some areas there as well, but we have not been successful in having those conversations.
Yeah, so I see a little building, like a tiny square building. Is it trails? Is it DPW? What is going on over there?
That's actually the pump station for the reservoir. So that's where the intake for the reservoir is for Wallace. And that's why we're saying that so the area to the west, I believe, is water department land, and that's why we're saying that we think it might be worth the dialogue of seeing if the water department wants the conservation area that we'd be parting with.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions, folks? Hearing none. Greg, go ahead, Sean. Sorry, I didn't see you waving at me.
No problem. I was muted and just waving a blank hand. Is Cole Avenue sewered, or would you be bringing a sewer line up to service this new development?
It stops about 100 feet shy of our site. However, there is connection at Esperanto that we would bring around, because the high point makes sense to use the gravity sewer for the I think we can get from the high point, all but 4 of the units can go gravity to Esperanto, and then we would extend the sewer to our site and do individual pump lift stations for the 4 units that are to the southeast. So the first 2 as you enter the road would have to be pumped, and then everything else would go gravity down to Esperanto.
Would you have to increase the current line size, or is a line that comes up within 100 feet of you, is that sufficient?
It should be sufficient. It's an 8-inch, which would serve, a much larger area. We're preliminarily, we just looked at it. So even if at minimum slope, it would handle the site, but it may have more capacity if we go and check the slope than what we initially designed for. Again, these are, going to be 3-bedroom units. It's not a huge tax, and this is not a very heavily built out area.
Thank you.
Another
Okay.
question. What's the condition of Cole Ave right now, and how wide is it? You mentioned having to make improvements. Would you have to make it much wider? And are there stone walls, or I've never been out there. Are there stone walls or anything like that in the way? Is that going to cause a problem with the abutters on Cole Ave?
So the right of way is not in the greatest shape currently. The stone walls, any landscaping work is at the edge of the right of way line. So all the improvements are within the 30-foot wide right of way. There would be some grading in the right of way that would go up to the edge of the property line, but there's no work on any of the private property. And, as it gets up close to our site, once it gets past Esperanto, it does narrow down to sometimes as narrow as 13 feet. So we're proposing to widen that to 20, and then it widens out a little bit as you get down heading to the road. It varies between 18 and 20 feet in spaces.
Thanks. And the reason I asked that question is because sometimes when these roads are narrow, 13 feet or whatever they are, people feel like their lot goes right to the road and they have, sheds or stone walls or trees or what have you there that would be impacted if you widen the road. But we'll probably be able to answer that question if we go on a site visit. And also I don't know, do you have stakes out and stuff where the new road would be, or where the widened road would be?
That was one of the questions I was going to ask from the board. What would you like to see staked out? Center line of road is usually a big one. I'm wondering if the rear house corners closest to the reservoir would make sense. Anything else that you want to look at, we can add and get staked out within a week.
Greg, what other things would you like to see on the ground before a site visit?
Yeah, I think it might be helpful, particularly in the section of the existing Cole Ave to the extent of the widening. That would be helpful,
Okay.
probably also for anybody, that's immediately abutting it. The center line is probably helpful. And like you said, I think those, again, this is fairly fluid, but, giving a sense of reference, that would probably, as we walk it, you could also point things out.
Esperanto is currently a paper road, right? There's not a paved.
Yep.
That's good.
Okay. Any other comments? So Tony, you think you need about a week to get things in the ground?
Yeah, I think by next Thursday, I should have everything in the ground.
Okay.
I don't know when you usually schedule your site walks for, but anytime after that would be.
But more based on you're getting your job finished, and then we can, you probably want to do it before the next meeting though, I'd imagine.
So, yeah, so I can try and put a rush on it. And
I mean,
if you,
we have 2 weeks right before our next meeting. So, I think the thing is that, seeing the condition on the ground is a big part of this, process. We're certainly in a very preliminary stage. But site visits tend to be compelling. And again, I think, as Mr. McKenna doesn't like to be the first guy on the block trying out the new OSRD. Well, it's not new with the first application. I think that this process will, make sure that we're thorough in our review, and with the hope of producing a great product. But I'm not willing to rush anything, but I just want to keep things moving, I guess is my point. And I hope that's a sign of agreement, Jim, with your
Yes.
smile. Okay.
Certainly.
Greg, any other next steps before a site visit?
No, and I started to look at the calendar. If it didn't work out for the Thursday, which again, I don't think we should rush anything. The next date that seems like it might make sense would be Tuesday, the 19th. The offices are closed on Monday. So I don't know if you feel if people want to look at their calendars, if like a 2 o'clock on the 19th seems reasonable.
I'm wide open that day, so
Right.
I can be there for you.
I'm in.
I cannot do it, but I can also go by another time. I've got other doctor's appointments that day.
Okay. And Tony, if you want to also just alert us when it is in the field, and Jane, if you want, we can set a separate visit.
Okay.
All right.
I
So
will.
tentatively, we'll say 2 p.m. on the 19th.
Excellent.
So the journey begins.
Thank you all for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Mr. Pinnell, thank you.
Yep.
So you don't really need a motion to continue, right?
You can make a motion to continue the pre-application to the meeting of April 21st.
I make a motion to continue the pre-application for Coles Ave to April 21st.
Second,
Thank you, Beverly. Roll call vote, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes,
member McCarl,
thank you, Hank.
member Bookin,
yes,
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry,
Yes.
and member Remsen.
Yes.
Okay.
So Greg, there was one person that, oh, there they go. I was going to notice the fact that there was one person that had their hand raised, Mr. Burnham. This is a pre-application process. We typically do not take public comment or question. And just to bring people up to date on site visits. Site visits are for the express purpose of board members and the applicant. There's no deliberations. There's no voting or anything that happens on it. It's just certainly for the education of the planning board members. So that's what's
Also,
gonna
no
happen on that.
discussion. There's
No
no,
discussion. Thank
no
you.
discussion.
Deliberation. Right. Thank you. Well, thanks, folks.
Thank
We're
you,
gonna move
everyone.
on to our other business. You can hang around. There's popcorn afterwards if you want to stay.
Rick, I've got a question at some point
Yeah.
about procedures.
Go ahead.
I got a telephone call when Craig was out of town and he was having trouble getting through to get approval on something that we had approved, and they need a sign off on it. I don't know whether Gemma got a hold of that or the fellow got a hold.
Yeah,
of it.
I think we took care of that.
You did.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
That's the
What is the
spyglass
normal
thing.
procedure on that, Craig? What?
Yeah, so the board had already approved it. It was just a signature on a
Right,
building
fine.
permit application, the final certificate of occupancy. And so it just kind of sprung up rather quickly. But
Right.
Gemma was able to take care of that in the office.
I told him that I thought that the staff was in the best position to do that, but if he couldn't get a hold of the staff, would he go to the chairman of the board to get the signature on a sign off?
No, the action of the
think that
board
was-
that they were looking for was already taken care of. So
No, that's what I
Um,
thought.
they were in a panic.
No problem.
right. This is the issue I raised with Gemma at Spyglass Lane, correct? It's the
Right.
last.
Sea glass, right.
Sea Glass, I'm sorry, Sea Glass Lane. And I think what happened, I got the call and Hank got a call. I think they went to the website and saw the names of members and
Yeah.
started calling us. And, I told them that it was not something we could act on.
That's what I told him, that I thought that it was a staff matter. There
And
was
you
not-
can always forward any inquiries to us.
Right.
All righty. So quickly onto other business, a request for release of covenant Deacon Farm Lane, definitive subdivision 473 Washington Street. We have Attorney Pratt with us this evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Adria Pratt. I'm an attorney with Cape Ann Law with offices at 45 Broadway in Rockport. I represent Ashburn Development Corporation, whose principal is William Sanborn of 35 Briarwood Street here in Gloucester. Bill is here with me today as a attendee on the Zoom meeting. Unfortunately, our engineer, John Judd, is not with me. So I'm going to do my absolute best to answer any technical questions, but I may have to bring in Bill for some of that if necessary. So we're back before you this evening regarding the release and substitution of 2 of the lots in the Deacon Farm Lane subdivision, which, as you probably know at this point, is off of Washington Street. As you remember, we were here back in November of last year asking for the release of 5 lots. Those lots were lots 2, 3, 5, 9, and 10, which you approved the release of at that time. And we're here tonight to ask whether the board may be willing to consider the substitution of lot 6 for lot 9. Unfortunately, the buyers of Lot 9 decided to wait until the subdivision had been completed before moving forward with their purchase of that lot. But we do have the buyer of Lot 6 who is ready and eager to go. He has his financing in place and is ready to purchase that lot. So we would hope to record or get the board to sign and then record a confirmatory covenant to release, or excuse me, not a covenant, the release of the covenant for the substitution of Lot 6 for Lot 9. So Lot 9 would not be for sale, and instead we would ask Lot 6 would be able to be sold. Additionally, we are also hoping to ask the board to release Lot 7, which is our affordable housing lot. We have, or I shouldn't say we, but Ashburn Development Corporation has ordered the 2-family home, and the financing has been approved for that construction. So things are ready to move in that regard if the board is willing to allow us to do that. And so just to give the board a pretty quick update in terms of the subdivision's progression since we've last met. The drainage has now been installed and all of the drainage fields have been completed. We have been told by the contractor that the construction of the stone wall that leads into the subdivision, so on the Washington Street side leading up into Deacon Farm Lane, is going to begin next week, in addition to the installation of the granite curbing in that subdivision, which will also begin next week. Both of those are weather permitting, of course. And then upon the installation of that curbing, they are planning to finish the grading and then begin to spread loam, following which they will plant the trees and complete the landscaping, as well as installing the street signs throughout the subdivision. We have also received final sign-off for the underground electrical installation. Unfortunately, however, I don't have a definite timeline for the beginning of that work. We've been told it's scheduled, but we don't have an actual date. I have reached out to National Grid, but have not yet heard back on that, but can certainly update Greg and members of the board as soon as I have more information on that. And then given the present timeline in terms of where we stand now, we anticipate being able to install the sidewalk and then lay the final coat of pavement this coming fall, which would then complete the subdivision project. So that is my quick little recap to get everyone up to speed as to where things stand at the present time. And so I can turn it over to Greg and members of the board for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Adria.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the timeline update. I know there's been concerns raised by some board members as well as abutters relating to the slope on the right-hand side entering the subdivision, which was kind of left in a fairly unstable condition over the winter. And so it's good to hear that that's something that's on the front burner for being stabilized. You know, otherwise, you know, we're kind of in the same position that we were in terms of the condition of the roadway at the first release, other than the additional drainage features that have been added since the board last released the lots from the covenant.
Yes, thank you.
So because it wasn't, and I didn't have the actual Form M in front of me, but it's not exactly, so you want to swap 6 for 9, so not sell 9, sell 6. And then what were the other requirements?
And then the other request was the release of lot 7, which is our 2-unit affordable housing lot.
Right.
And to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure how the release of that goes. I'm not sure if you would issue a release the same way you have done with the other lots, or if it's just for the building permit and then not a full But we're willing to, kind of follow whatever the board recommends in that regard. We were just hoping to be able to begin construction on that lot.
Do you have the Form M, Gemma, that you can put up that was filed? I just, again, in the spirit of moving things forward, I just want to make sure that we're releasing and swapping the right things.
While you're doing that, Adria, can I ask a question? How many lots are left after, if we do lot 7 and swap lot 6 for 9?
Okay, so if we swap 6 for 9, that gives us still 5 lots that have been released, which leaves 5 left. So if you allow the release of lot 7 for the affordable, that will leave 4 lots left in the subdivision.
Thanks.
It's a 10-lot subdivision.
Yep, right. I guess I could have done that math. myself.
I have a quick question about the lots that are under agreement right now. Are they planned for single family homes or 2-family homes? What's the breakdown on those?
I'm sorry, Sean, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Will you say that one more time?
Sorry, I don't know which microphone I talk into.
No, much better. I turned my volume up as well.
Are you, in terms of the breakdown on the lots that are under agreement now, evidently 4 lots that are under agreement at this point, what's the breakdown on the proposed unit construction on those? Are those all single family homes, or are those some of those 2-family homes? What's projected for those?
So quite honestly, I do not know what they are planning to build. The way that we sold them, they were, they could only be single and 2-family because that was what the board had dictated when you approved the subdivision. But in terms of what so we've sold 3 lots so far, and in terms of what those 3 lot owners are planning to do in terms of single family versus 2-family, not entirely sure. I can certainly reach out to their respective attorneys and find out and get you that information. But I do not know that at the present time.
I can tell you that we have processed one application for one of the lots on the northern side of the roadway for a single family home. There haven't been building permits pursued for the other 2.
Thank you, Greg.
Right, and I think what Sean's getting at is that we had a condition in the final approval of reaching 6 dwelling units as the threshold. And if there was more dwelling units proposed, that there would be a look back to get to our affordable, the appropriate affordable calculation. So I guess, so this Form M is from November of 21. So I don't know that we have a Form M that's drafted for what you're looking for tonight. Is that right?
I prepared
Okay,
2
so 6
different
and 7,
forms.
yeah. Okay.
So that's 6 and 7. I also, Mr. Chairman, I also did prepare, and I wasn't quite sure of the format for this, for the substitution. I prepared a confirmatory Form M to also be recorded that would replace the one that was recorded in November. And then it's, the top of it specifically says that lot 9 is not to be released.
Gotcha.
And I did provide that to Greg prior to the meeting, but I'm happy to resubmit that. There it is.
Yeah, I've seen it. Thank you. Lots of Forms M's. Any other questions or concerns at this point from members?
I just echoing what Adria said about how to handle lot 7. I have no trouble switching 6 for 9. And I don't know what Greg's opinion is on the state of the subdivision in terms of releasing one more lot, but it seems to me that if we don't know the final number of units, then we don't know how many affordable units we're asking for. So I don't know.
So because we'll have additional lots that are secured, I'm all for advancing the release of the lot that will have 2 affordable units on it. And I would also go as far as to say also for sale. They have a process to qualify those units for sale with the HCD. So to provide the flexibility so that those can come to market earlier in the subdivision rather than, which is always the concern, at the end of the subdivision when, there could be issues. But in the balance of what's been released, there wouldn't be a need for any more than 2 at this point. And we can still watch and wait and see how the others play out, and the board can always hold one if we get to that point where there's an additional unit that's required.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think we're at a motion point. Okay,
Yes, I move that we approve the release for covenant, which exchanges lot 6 for 9 and has an additional release of lot 7 for the Deacon Farm Lane definitive subdivision at 473 Washington Street.
I'll second that.
thank you, Henry. Roll call vote, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
member McCarl,
Yes,
member Bookin,
Yes,
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry,
Yes.
member Remsen.
Yes.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Greg and Mr. Chairman, if there is a different format for that confirmatory Form M regarding the switch out of lot 6 for 9, I'm happy to revise that however you want to reflect it.
Okay.
So just let me know, but if what I have provided works, all the best, all the better. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you again.
Thanks, Adrian. Okay, last under other business this evening is a request for extension of the cluster development special permit at 186 Concord Street, Assessor's Map 248, Lot 14, and this is a simple division or decision to adopt. So I believe.
So drafted decision, which I think is reflective of, the discussion at the, this was actually a few meetings back. But again, it's just confirming the board's extension of the cluster development at 186 Concord Street for the specified period, which was essentially a 2-year extension due to the cause shown by the applicant.
Do you have that handy, Greg or Gemma, just to reference it, the date? Thank you.
I had a comment though on the top of the second page.
Okay.
The first sentence there, the planning board, something doesn't seem right, including the applicant's attorneys, blah, blah, blah. And then it says applicant's attorney at the final clause. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Yeah, attorney response testimony.
I mean, you could probably take out including the applicant's attorney, that whole phrase, because you're addressing whatever they submitted in the bottom, in the last phrase.
Yeah, I suppose including the correspondence and testimony received, So just remove that first reference to applicant's attorney.
I think so. I'm not sure. Anyway, it doesn't say what the applicant's attorney was submitting in that first phrase. If there was something else the applicant's attorney was submitting, you could put the word in there.
Oh, I see. And there's a comma.
Punctuation's perfect.
I suppose you could also say the evidence presented by the applicant's attorney, comma.
Maybe that's
correspondence
what you meant. I don't know what you meant.
I went back and forth a little bit with Attorney Eliason on this, so it may be, we'll clean that up to make it a clean reference.
Okay.
Or a clean sentence.
I think you were right, Greg. If you just throw in the evidence presented by the applicant's attorney,
Yeah.
take off the attorneys, that would clean it up.
Otherwise, I think
I mean,
looks great.
it could be including the presentation by the applicant's attorney, correspondence and testimony received. That's what I'll do.
Okay, just get rid of that apostrophe S then after attorney.
Yes, applicant's attorney. Yep. Okay.
So if you wanted to restate your motion, Jane, with the,
Sure. I move that we approve the, what is this called?
division to adopt.
Extension
Um,
request.
Yeah, extension. The request for extension and amendment of the cluster development special permit at 186 Concord Street, as amended at this meeting. I move that we do that.
Okay,
I'll second it.
thank you, Henry. Roll call vote, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
member McCarl,
Yes,
member Bookin,
Yes,
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry, member Remsen.
Yes.
Fantastic. I'm glad I stretched out before this meeting.
Do we have time for an update from Greg about zoning amendments?
No,
Yes.
I can just give you a timeline. How's that?
that's great.
So there was the intention of the kind of set of amendments that were associated with height and 3-family allowance was going to be heard at the Planning and Development Committee meeting last night. That was continued out for 2 weeks. The public hearing was on the set of 6 amendments that primarily deal with 2-family, as well as the dimensions around 2-family compliant lots, were scheduled to be heard on April 12th, but are also going to be pushed out 2 weeks. So they will be on the agenda of the city council, I believe, on April 26th, if that's a Tuesday, I believe it is.
let's see.
Yeah, so there'll be additional discussion at the next P&D meeting and then public hearing at the city council meeting that follows.
So is the public hearing still open at the city council meeting?
It is. The public comment
Yeah.
was closed and they are now moving into council discussion, questions, and then we'll entertain motions.
And why did they push it out? Do you know?
I think because
No?
I'm not there.
Oh,
I will actually be on a plane,
He's on
which
vacation.
I didn't know at the time when I scheduled this trip that the flight is actually right
sorry.
during
Didn't
that.
didn't
So
mean to out you.
no,
But the April 26th is my birthday, so I really don't want to go to the meeting, but I will. Okay, well, that's great. And so just to confirm, the public comment period has closed. But the
public
public
comment
hearing,
period was closed and the all the written testimony was closed as of a date. The council rules of procedure have a date prior to the public hearing, so they will
Okay.
pick up where they left off, I believe, on 26th.
okay. And what do we do? What does the planning board do, if anything, now about the MBTA, whatever that overlay district?
It's a matter of what the final regulations look like, which has an indeterminate time of when they will be issued. I'm assuming that it will probably, I think from the last presentation that I heard on it, would not be until sometime in maybe the early summer. So the steps that need to be taken have been taken so far. The only thing that remains is providing documentation to DHCD on the information session that we had, and then also the filing of basically, there are a series of questions and a kind of an online submittal as to whether or not you believe you have the current zoning in place to comply, which is kind of an odd thing because they're not final regulations, but they're asking you to identify whether you think you would comply with the draft regulations. So I think it's kind of a wait and see in terms of what those regulations look like before any additional steps will be taken.
Okay, thank you.
I think Sean deserves a medal for taking all the flack that he's had to take.
I do too, Sean. I can't believe you've been fighting the good fight. I'm too scared to engage. I'm afraid if I answer anybody on Facebook or what is it next door, that someone's gonna come paint my door red or something.
I don't mind being.
At least they
hated,
don't
though.
come after you with a gun, I hope.
But I
Crazy.
think with regard to the TOD, I think that it would not be a bad idea, again, not to take up the MBTA TOD because that's still in the state of flux, but we have our own draft TOD, which germinated 8 years ago. I don't think it would be a bad idea for us to actually send that to the subcommittee to actually look at that and actually come up with a reasoned proposal that shows that a TOD can be accomplished, that answers many of the demands requested by the MBTA Communities Act, but also doesn't offend 80% of the community. I think it's doable. I think a lot of the backlash about the MBTA Communities Act is unfounded and not rooted in reality. I think some of the requests within that act are infinitely doable. The district already has a higher density than is required in the act. I think all we have to do to satisfy the act is to come up with a well-crafted by right. If you want to build a multifamily structure, do it this way. And if you meet these guidelines, it's easy peasy. If you don't, then it's not going to be easy peasy. But I think if we don't somehow address sort of the goals that the state is tossing on us, we're going to be the recipient of a 40B application that exactly addresses what the state is asking for. The community is not going to have any oversight of that at all. They're going to be in an uproar. ZBA will be forced to reject it based on popular demand. They'll go to the state and it will land back in our laps, just like the condos on Good Harbor Beach. But instead of that, it's going to be 120 units near the railroad station. So I think if we're proactive and say, we're working on this because we're working on what we initially started back in 2013, 2014, we're just continuing that work. Here's a TOD that works for Gloucester, produced completely with Gloucester thinking. And it just so happens to answer some of the requests from the MBTA Communities Act. I think that would be a good service if we want to do that. But again, I'm somebody who doesn't mind to be hated by all the right people. So
Sean, do you want to pick the frying pan or the fire to jump out of first?
well, I think, again,
I'll help you, Sean. I'm in.
Not to go.
I mean, I think it does really potentially make sense to see what the guidelines are, just because I think you're gonna, again, I think there's an opportunity there. What we had in draft form would not necessarily comply, but again, it's about what's the scale and character of what the board wanted to put forward for that particular district. But I can also share, we can continue to have, the information as it's coming along in the Google Drive. Jem and I took a hard look at this. The state has made this very, very complicated in their current draft for the calculations. There's the mayor's comment letter is pretty accurate in that we have a lot of multifamily on smaller lots than our district allows, and they can't really be counted in the equation. So there's this whole capacity thing, and then there's the capacity number per community, and then the density. And so it will be interesting to see how these regs get modified, because I think they will be. I think there's been significant enough comment from a lot of different places that, like you said, it may turn out that, there's something that could be done, again, that's rooted in what this board wants to propose for the area, but might also have an opportunity to comply. So I think it may make sense to kind of look, kind of see how that comes out. It's a couple of months away, probably, but if you guys want to meet in subcommittee, I know David also has thoughts as well about some other things. So if you want to kind of continue to, or kind of build that back up and meet as a subcommittee, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, we haven't seen quite this many distortions of reality by people accusing us of things since we approved the shopping center up at Market Basket.
Or the hotel, for that matter.
Same people complaining too. Interesting.
Is there any way we can find the information that Sean, you were referring to that got started that we can review?
I think that's the,
Yeah,
it's online.
I think
right?
we put some of that in the Google Drive, but we can certainly refresh that
You-
and make sure that all the information is in there.
On the city website for reimagining Railroad Avenue.
Yeah.
That's 2013, 2014.
Beverly, do you have a
Beverly's
comment?
trying to ask a question.
Well, two comments. First of all, the irony here about all of the scuttlebutt about what to me on the except for the height increase, the proposals in this set of zoning amendments is almost housekeeping, and it's just completely blown up from what I understand. And the irony is that the council passed accessory dwelling units, which essentially accomplished the same thing of allowing a second unit on a single family lot, and everyone thinks it's terrific. So it is rather ironic. But the other thing is I think there are a couple of counselors who really are genuinely concerned about the shortage of affordable housing, and not just for lower and very low income, but just all the households in the community that can't find the housing that they can afford. And they really want to do a holistic kind of look at what that's about. And it seems to me that the MBTA, did I say it right? MBTA proposal on the table becomes an opportunity to have that conversation. And so to the degree that the planning board has some ideas and has given some thinking to this, should we be called upon informally by the city council, maybe by the planning and development subcommittee, to come and have a conversation with them? We've talked about it, and we may have something constructive to add. And if that's the case, there may be some counselors who are willing to really look at this seriously and maybe run with it. So that's just my thought on it.
Wait, so you're suggesting the subcommittee should meet and have some conversations? Yeah.
Yeah, I
agree
think
with you.
so. I think we should, so that we kind of know where we're coming from and what we might. There's several ways to look at this issue, and we might be able to cast, to just come up with some ideas that if interested counselors come to us in some kind of forum, informally or formally, that we're able to share what we're thinking.
So is there a limit to the amount of a minimum or a maximum for subcommittees for the planning board? Greg? 3, it can only be 3?
If it goes to 4, it's not a subcommittee, it's a quorum. So you can do that as well, hold planning board meetings, if more members want to participate in the discussion.
I'm sorry, David's not here because I think he wants to be involved.
Yeah, and I certainly, Sean and I are really interested in this.
Greg, isn't it like a city council subcommittee meeting that if additional?
We'll notice as a subcommittee, and then if there's a quorum present, then we'll notice it.
Yeah, that's a way to do
That
it.
can happen. That can happen as well.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. And then it seems to me that if the subcommittee meets and just crafts some ideas, I mean, we're still at the very early stage, we could carve out time at a bigger meeting, which is, you know, a public meeting, and share those ideas with the rest of the board. And just, I think the issue of affordable housing is so critical in this community that we should, as the planning board, get out ahead of it a little bit so that we can maybe influence and shape some of the response, because otherwise we're going to have 900 people sitting at council meetings screaming, "Not in my community." And, you know, don't we want to kind of have a more constructive process than that? Is kind of where I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I would also say we should think about the lessons that we've learned from this last go round of the zoning amendments, which is you know, what we initially presented might not have been as simplified, or in other words, you know, presented in as a simplified way as we could have. And we didn't even really present it. We just said, oh, here's what we've been working on. And even though the public process was followed to a T, some people felt like there wasn't enough of a public process. So I agree with you, Beverly. I think we should get out in front about it, in front of it, talk about it, listen, you know, to everybody about it, make people feel heard. I don't know, but
I agree.
I think we
So-
have to recognize, one thing, and that is there's always going to be people that will want to have more and more and more and more discussion, regardless of what we end up with. There are some people that are just never satisfied, and that's just a criticism that unfortunately has been going on for a long time. And it's unfortunate that you know, they take the shots that they do without being well informed. But I mean, it's just part of the process that we've had to deal with over the years.
it is, but it shouldn't be this hard for the city council somehow. So.
Well, I think, Jane, that there's, you know, we spent time on 9 technical recommendations, right? And there was no, in my opinion, you know, the notion of those amendments, you know, creating lowercase affordable or uppercase affordable, that was not the focus of the discussion, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
And so then the state comes down with this, you know, effort, and then you have a city councilor who writes the city council's recommendation to the state, which,
I know.
where do the facts come from, right? And so if you want to have a discussion about uppercase affordable, I think we've worked on that to the degree that we've offered, you know, density credit based on a lower AMI threshold, right? And we've talked about inclusionary language and making that, frankly, a pretty high contribution, right? And so before we start spinning our wheels on uppercase or lowercase, I would like to look at, you know, what the housing authority is doing with money that gets contributed to them. You know, I mean, in the last 5 years, this community is, you know, will produce almost 100, right? So 30 at Cameron's, 44 at Middle Street at the YMCA, and 30. So that's over almost 100 units of affordable housing under HUD at the standard of 80% AMI, right? I mean, it still costs money to build something, right? So if you're going to tell somebody else to build something, and I think Sean was really the champion of the much more aggressive AMI threshold, much lower, which comports with our local average household income, then, you know, those are things that we've already talked about, and they haven't necessarily come to light in as much as creating, you know, something. But again, somebody else has got to, you know, pay for it and build it, right? And if the housing, and what's the, I mean, so maybe we have the housing authority come to us and say, what are you doing with your dough, right? I mean, what proactive plan do you have? Because we're spinning our wheels here, and if you've got money and you need to partner with people, then let's do that, right? So, Beverly.
Well, I think there are two kinds of housing. I think the fact that 44% of the people living in our community or households in this community are paying more than 40% of their income for housing. So they're considered to be, housing vulnerable.
Right.
And the fact that we had a 200-unit apartment complex come online and it filled almost immediately suggests that it isn't just a matter of providing housing at 80, 60, or 30 of AMI. We're looking at members of our community who are at the average mean income or 120% of mean income who are not being able to find units. So we're talking about a class of affordable housing that isn't housing authority kinds of stuff. It's just general units, and we do not have a allowed by right multifamily zone in this community, so that those units, smaller units, more dense projects can come online by right. And there is a development, the market can provide some of that housing if we had the zoning. So this is a very complicated situation, and it isn't going to be settled by a couple of housekeeping proposals for the zoning code to routinize duplexes in single family zones. It's just bigger than that. So.
Okay.
Well, I would suggest maybe we see the public hearing to its closure and maybe meet as a subcommittee in early May. We'll have a little bit of a debrief at that point. And I think I know what Beverly's referencing. I think there are some other ideas about affordability on a larger scale. I mean, to me, I think, our successes other than the Fuller project with affordability, because we had an inclusionary ordinance, are the partnerships with the nonprofits. And I also just point out the Cameron's project, Harbor Village, and the Y project, they're actually all at 60 or lower. So we've created some at 80, and then 74 units at 60 or lower, and 44 of those dedicated entirely for seniors. So we've I think that's a pretty big accomplishment in the last 5 years. Prior to that, I don't know, again, the Thatcher Road 40B project that produced 3 that were just finally constructed and sold. There hasn't been a lot of affordable housing development. So I think it's front and center. The Affordable Housing Trust has just been kind of reconstituted. They're eager to think about strategies as well. So there may be ways that the board can collaborate with them as well. But I think it does make sense to kind of see, how things shape up in the public hearing in the next couple of weeks, and then we can get back at it. I'm encouraged. It's interesting. I had a discussion with Jill Cahill a couple of weeks ago, and talking about the different initiatives that we're working on, and what are the ones that you want to continue to work on. And I think the housing production plan has a lot of good ideas in it, and I think following through on it is important. And I point out, when I spoke to the city council, we had just as many people participating then as we do now, although signing on to petitions is a little different than coming to a meeting and learning about something and participating in the process. So I'm encouraged to hear the members wanting to continue to work on this work, because it's important.
Can I just make one more comment? I think we should work with the state too, to acknowledge housing units that come in under these other programs, rather than say they don't count. And I think we're in a position to, if we get our act together, to maybe influence the decision makers in that regard.
All right, Gemma, you're in charge then. Going to the State House.
Well, I think we can all support the city councilors in this process too. They've done, a lot of work, and they've been to a lot of extra meetings, and the meetings have taken forever, and they're trying to learn about it and understand it. I think a few of them don't still actually understand it. So, I don't know how everybody individually wants to support the city councilors, but I'm trying to call them and email them and engage them.
Thank you for that.
I'm going to the Harbor Lake breakfast with a couple of them tomorrow morning, and we'll be pounding away on them in the car. So
Trapped with Sean.
All right, Hank, I need you to do your thing.
I'd like to move for adjournment.
A motion. Do you
Second.
have a- Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
member McCarl,
Yes.
member Bookin,
Yes.
member Cook,
Yes.
member Henry,
yes.
member Remsen.
Yes.
Okay, see some of you in person in 2 weeks, and I'll let you know, Jane, when things are staked, and if maybe even next week. But
I'm sorry I missed the in-person because I haven't seen any of you in person in literally 2 years, except once in passing on another site visit. So anyway,
All right,
But-
thank you.
okay,
see
have a
you
good
guys.
night.
I
Bye.
have
Night,
a problem, Greg. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do that site visit on the.
Oh, yeah, I indicated, Hank, we'll definitely take photographs and we'll bring it back to the next
Because
meeting. and
I have
kind of-
some difficulty hiking around the woods.
Yep, yeah, we'll
Okay.
walk you through it virtually.
That's okay. I can handle that. No problem.
Okay,
Bye.
all right, have a good night.
Thank
Right.
you.